time no see or long time no listen, I guess, in this format. It's been a hot minute, but I am back. I am your host, Anna. This is Anna Rose Reads the podcast. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back after a month long hiatus. I just needed a little break to recharge and to kind of plan out the rest of the year. And I'm very fortunate that I had the time to do so. But I'm also really, really happy to be back today and sharing a conversation with somebody who I think has one of the coolest, most insightful, just really, really interesting viewpoints in horror today. Her name is Rae Wilde, and we are going to be discussing her novella, I Can Fix Her, which is on shelves today from Clash Books. This is a novella that kind of looks at the really messed up version of what if in relationships and, what if we just tried harder? Or what if I was a little different? Or maybe what if she was a little different? It's a really cool story and really tugged at my heartstrings. And me and Ray have a rather honest and vulnerable conversation, which I cannot tell you how much I treasure. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Welcome back, guys. Hi, Ray. How are you?
I am so well, Anna. Thank you for having me on. I'm very excited that we finally get to chat.
I know. I feel like we've like commented on each other's posts for a while and ships in the
Yeah,
night on social media, but it's nice to be able to finally chat.
right.
And we are here today to talk about your book I Can Fix Her, which is coming out this summer with Clash Books. But if people don't know who you are or they don't know about I Can Fix Her, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and the book?
Absolutely. So I am Rae Wilde, but I've also published a number of books under the name Rae Knowles. So some of those are like Merciless Waters, The Stradivarius, my collection, I Do Not Apologize for My Position on Men, which unfortunately is out of print at the moment because the publisher shut down, but we are shopping it and hoping for a new home soon between my agent and I. And yeah, you can find me on social media. I'm there quite a bit on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah, if you're not following Ray on social media, you should be because your TikToks, I think that I've never laughed so hard. They
Thank
kind of
you.
take me by surprise because you're book promoting and then you're also just being very, very funny as well.
Thank you. I like causing problems on social media. But it tends to happen in the most unexpected ways. Like I made, this is a total sidetrack, but I made a video about orca whales like a
Oh
month ago.
yeah.
And the hate that I inspired on Instagram was unreal. Um, so yeah, I would say my social media is lively. I try to keep it fun.
Oh, I would say so. I have a great time. That's all I can say. I have an absolute ball of a time. But to talk a little bit more about I Can Fix Her, I'm gonna let you kind of pitch it because I don't want to accidentally spoil it. It's not a super long story, so if you want to go ahead and kind of introduce the story and what it's about, I'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. So we open on our main character, Johnny, as she has spotted her ex-girlfriend, Alice, at a cafe. And Alice is there with another woman after ghosting Johnny for about 6 months. And as a result of this run-in, they have sort of a maybe we should give it another shot conversation. And we kind of get thrown into a week of rapidly evolving changes. But whether or not Johnny and Alice are changing for one another as they promised is up for debate.
That's a good way to put it. And I really, really enjoyed reading this. It felt like it was a very visceral read for me because I think, a lot of us, who hasn't been in a breakup or even it doesn't even necessarily have to be romantic, but friendship breakups or losing touch with loved ones, like you're in that position of, oh, well, maybe we can make it work later on down the line, maybe this has changed the circumstance. So I think it's a really approachable kind of plot to write about. Do you want to go ahead and discuss, the inspiration for the story? Like, this is such a broad question. I always hate, hate, hate asking it, but the big question is like, how did this story come to be?
So I guess, first of all, I'm much more interested in writing the kind of horror that explores like what we do to one another and what we do to ourselves than I am interested in the sort of horror in terms of like there's a monster or there's like a killer with a knife. And that's not at all to disparage those kinds of horror. That's just what interests me personally. So yeah, I would say this is more of a psychological horror. And the inspiration comes from a few places. So first, I have written about these characters in other forms and other worlds for a really long time. So anyone who's read Merciless Waters, they're not exactly the same characters, but it's a very similar relationship dynamic. I've also written a number of short stories with a couple that has a similar relationship dynamic. And I always knew that I wanted to cap off all of those stories somehow and give them an ending, while at the same time kind of knowing that would be a challenge because of the nature of their relationship. So that's what I was attempting to do with I Can Fix Her. I think like in terms of other media inspirations, my favorite book of all time is This Is How You Lose the Time War. I never shut up about it. And after reading it, I did have this thought of like, okay, but what if we did this, but like evil, like sort of the evil version of this, like the anti-soulmates, like destined to find each other in every lifetime, but for the worst possible outcome, you
Yeah, it's a
know?
threat.
Um,
I will find
and
you.
then, yes, I will find you a threat in parentheses. The other sort of media inspiration I think about is Mother,
Mhm.
exclamation point, the movie. Um, that the psychological horror that I experienced watching Mother, there's no comparison to it for me. And
No.
I was really inspired and unsettled by the nightmare logic that that film is operating on and use the word visceral, and that is always how I talk about the movie Mother, is that I had this visceral reaction to it. It was like they reached inside my brain, pulled out my worst nightmares and let them unfold on screen. And so, yeah, I definitely wrote I Can Fix Her with that same kind of nightmare logic in mind.
That makes sense. I don't even think I made it all the way through Mother. I think I actually like caught it like on cable or something. I think like FX had it on and I put it on and I was so freaked out. And very much for the same reasons, like you say, it's like that nightmare. It's really hard to place like exactly what it is, like pinpoint what it is, but it's like everything that can freak you out just does. It
Yeah.
just pushes all your buttons.
And for me, it's they very astutely pulled out these nightmares that, in my mind, are specific to women because
Yeah,
of
yeah.
societal expectations. And so, I wouldn't say that I Can Fix Her does it in that way, but I do think it's nightmarish in terms of like in within the context of a relationship rather
Oh
than
yeah.
within the context of what it means to be a woman performing a gender role, which I think is what Mother is doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. With I Can Fix Her, and I'm somebody who I say this all the time. Like, I believe genre has a purpose to like get readers to know what they're picking up. But whenever you're writing, I think like you should write whatever you want, and whatever it is, it is. Like, there's no easy box to put some books in. And I think that this is one of those that it feels very interior and psychological for those reasons that we just talked about. But you also take it kind of like in a cosmic place
Mhm.
in some ways. And so do you want to speak a little bit about like how you think this story like if you had to pick a box or tried to pick a box, how would you describe this story genre-wise?
I would say it was mainly psychological horror, but I think there is a splash of cosmic in there. I wouldn't necessarily like frame it just as cosmic horror because I think if you go into it thinking I'm going to read a cosmic horror book, it will not be what you have in mind.
Yeah.
But it does have sort of a splash. Like if we're making a mixed drink, there's a splash of cosmic horror in there.
And there's like another movie that I have in mind that I think of. It's Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's like a note to that here. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't, and I'm embarrassed to say that because I've heard such great things and I haven't gotten to it yet.
Well, it's just got that same note of like in every reality, this is what we're facing, you know? And I
Mhm.
think that that's something that I Can Fixer really, really encapsulates. And especially with relationship horror. And like I said, it's because it's something that I think we all go to. We're all connected to people in some way, whether we like it or not. And
Yeah.
so to have those, like that bond really examined in this way feels really scary to me. Like the way that you wrote the story when they first go back to the apartment after they run into each other, I just felt like a sense of dread. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the horror that happens within a relationship, that influence the story?
Oh, hell yeah. I'm just coming off my second divorce, so this is ideal timing for me to answer this question.
Perfect, perfect.
So I'll say, and this is going to sound grim, and I don't necessarily encourage anyone to share this belief, but I am unsure about my faith in the longevity of love.
Yeah.
I am very sure about my faith in the longevity of agony. Um, and that's just from my own personal life experience and what I've seen in those around me. And I think like it's interesting as we're talking, like soulmate, right? I'm doing air quotes, nobody can see them, but I am doing them. Um, we think of soulmate as like this, oh, we'll find each other in every lifetime kind of thing. We call that person the one. And then we also use this term, the one that got away. And
Hmm.
I've always been more interested in that one. Like, what if there was this anti-soulmate that you also have to meet in every lifetime so that they can destroy you or so that they can facilitate you destroying yourself?
Yeah.
Um, I have certainly had, there's one relationship in mind in particular that feels very much like that, with that same sort of intensity, that magnetic pull between two people, that feeling, people talk about, I just knew, right? They describe like I was just sure. And I have felt that in a relationship with someone who I can only describe as like an anti-soulmate, brought me to my knees and did it somewhat gleefully, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm not alone in that experience.
No,
And
I mean, I can tell you right now, I know about that. I've had that experience.
yeah, so like that's what I think of when I think of like the one who got away. And not necessarily that every time we want to catch them again. I think sometimes people do, they have a draw to like try again, and sometimes they don't. But I do think that's a pretty common experience to feel like you have met this person who was like quote unquote the one, but in like an evil way, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I think one of the things that scares me the most about this idea of like being sure, right, is that, whenever it was the not right person, you were so sure. And like what does that say about you? Like that's the thing that had always freaked me out the most because, I like you said, I think everybody has a relationship at some point. And like I said, I don't think it necessarily has to even be romantic. I think it could be friends, it could be family members. I mean, that you are sure that this person's got your back or whatever, and then they don't. I think for me, the thing that freaks me out the most and that you tapped into with the story is the exploring the possibility, well, maybe under these conditions it would be different. If like we could just turn this knob this way, if we could just crank this level down this way, it would be okay. But I think, it took me a long time to like come to the realization that in no reality are these people ever going to be okay people or, there for you in the way that you need. And it's a really fucking hard thing to come to, man. It just like it wrecks you to get to that place because I think it also threatens your relationship with yourself more than anything
Oh,
else.
absolutely. It's gutting. And I relate very deeply with what you said about, so how do I trust myself now? Because I was so sure. Like I'm a double divorcee and I'm happily doubly divorced. I would divorce them both all over again. But it does create a sense of doubt in my mind because I do reflect back on the times that I was so sure, right?
Yeah.
Like sure enough to sign the papers and do the legal documents and all of the things and merge the bank accounts. And it does leave you with a sense of self-doubt. And I'm reluctant now to make long-term promises about things. And I say things like, this is how I feel now, and I forever reserve the right to change my mind.
Yeah.
Because experience has shown me that, like, the only thing that I can really rely upon is that everything will change.
Yeah. And in a way that it's kind of a comforting notion to embrace that, to not be so like locked into things. And I think for me, whenever I've realized this about myself and like not, because I had the same feeling of like, I can only speak to how I feel right now. The beautiful thing is like everybody changes. Like
Yeah.
everybody goes through this and everybody changes. And every decision that we all make and the thing that's comforted me and like allowed me to move forward away from these things is that everybody's doing the best that they can with what they have for the most part, with the exception of the malicious people that we run into, right? But for the most part, everybody's doing the best of, like what they can with what they have. And I think, the thing that allowed me to trust myself again was knowing you just did what you thought was right for you at the time. And nobody can ever fault you for that. I mean, and
Yeah.
I think it's something that Johnny and Alice kind of explore a little bit, like in the moment when they run into each other again. Well, it's like, well, this feels right now, but then as everything unfolds over the course of a week, you're like, shit, this doesn't feel right anymore, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, and I think the other thing too is that the way that you chose to kind of characterize Johnny and Alice, especially with the perspective that you told the story, was really, really interesting. Do you want to speak a little bit to how and this, I'm doing my best to frame this question without spoiling it because it does kind of give away how things end up in the end, but the perspective that you decided to tell the story.
Yeah. Well, so again, just like I find perspective really interesting and painful, right? Like hindsight is 2020, and that can be really painful. To have to look at your own actions in the past with the clarity of not having the intensity of emotion in the moment. So, when I was thinking about how I wanted to tell this story, again, kind of going back to like the feelings that I wanted to evoke were dread and agony. And in thinking about the layers of agony that I think we all most likely experience as a result of a really toxic relationship or a really bad relationship, there is the agony in the moment, and then there is another kind of agony that comes after when you look back at the choices that you made, often to your own detriment, and a sort of guilt and shame that comes in another wave afterward. So yeah, it's tough to talk about without giving anything away, but that's sort of what I was thinking in terms of perspective.
In a weird way, though, it was oddly very peaceful whenever you come to realize what's happening and why the story is being told the way that it is. Did you always know that you were gonna kind of end in that spot, or
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna take my time answering so that I don't give any spoilers.
yeah?
In thinking about writing an ending for these two people, I knew that it couldn't be clean,
hmm
um, because their relationship throughout all of the narratives that I've ever written about them has been fraught and cyclical. And it would be outside of these characters that I've written for it to become anything else, because that is just who these people are at their cores.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was always the plan going in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you brought up a really good point about this. There's something really horrific that I've found in reading certain kinds of horror about reading about cycles.
Mhm.
And trying to break cycles, whether, in all kinds of different ways. Do you want to talk a little bit about the horror of cycles and like trying to break a cycle and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I have a lot of experience with cycles. I'm a person in long-term recovery from addiction. And addiction has been my most salient experience with living in a cycle, and living in a cycle that is sort of killing you over time.
hmm
But just cannot stop, just cannot get out of. And there's a very real misery in that, first of all, which I did want to capture. But there's also this phrase. So my recovery pathway has been Narcotics Anonymous, and one of the phrases that they would say a lot when I came into the rooms was like you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick, basically.
Right.
And I'm a big believer in that. They also say if nothing changes, nothing changes, which is like, yeah, like that seems obvious, but when you really think about it, it's like I believe people can change. I think they usually don't, but I think that they can, right? If they put a lot of work into it. But something has to change for things to change. If you
Yeah.
continue to do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got. That's another NA thing. But I think we see that play out in relationships quite a bit where people talk about changing, but they're not actually changing anything. The behaviors that they're doing are the same. The arguments that they're getting into are fundamentally the same. Like the power dynamics that are existing are the same. So of course it ends in the same result.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you bring up a really good topic that I kind of want to talk about as well is like the propensity for change, particularly with Johnny and Alice. So, as the story unfolds, it kind of gets revealed that, they're both falling back into old patterns more than, anticipated. So, what was that writing experience like in writing these characters who very much fall into themselves? Like that, they're very tried and true characters, is how it felt to me when I was reading.
Yeah. So I tried to give Johnny some initial, like one of the things that I think we do actually to, and I think it's to avoid change, but I think we're telling ourselves that we're changing when we do it, is distraction. Like
Yeah.
using distraction or hyperfixation on one thing to make us feel like we're doing something different when we're not. And Johnny has some moments of that in the initial day because the book is organized into days of really trying to like hyper fixate on a thing in order to block out the familiar emotions rushing back because she thinks that that will sort of break the cycle. But ultimately, like you said, they do fall back into their own behavior patterns. And to be honest, it felt very natural to write because, like I said, I've been writing some version of these people for many years.
Yeah.
So I know who they are and I know what they want to do. If anything, it was more difficult to write them trying to pretend they were better in the beginning
Yeah.
than it was to have them go back to who they really are. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I could totally see that. And, and then the places that you take them, throughout the course of a week are really, to me, they're very imaginative and you put them in situations that are like really, I'm curious how you came up with those situations because yeah, they're very horrific and a bit, I don't say this as a slight, but they're a bit out there, like they're, like really exaggerated circumstances so that way you don't miss the point of why they're there. Where did the creativity behind some of those scenes come from?
Yeah, so that was actually really fun.
Yeah.
What I did initially is I wrote out a list of the elements that I wanted to include each day and how they would change each day. I don't know that everyone will pick up on it. Maybe they will, and I'm not actually that clever. But the the changes that happen while they're very dramatic are all connected to one
Yeah.
another and are all triggered by a choice that the characters are making. So, for example, like snow might melt when someone lights a fire. And but that might happen in a much bigger way than would happen in real life. Because again, we're using this nightmare logic where everything is blown up to the extreme.
Right, yeah. And it felt like, whenever the snow does melt, there's water. And it felt like
Yeah.
the feeling of, oh shit, we're sinking was very
Yeah.
palpable to me. Like that was something that I took away from it as being like a reflection of the internal state. Everything is just exaggerated, externally, which I thought was really, really cool. And I feel like that's, kind of where we get some of those cosmic components, especially as we move into the end of the story. And for a story that's as short as it is, I mean, you're managed to do a lot and say a lot within a short space. And I know that you're somebody who's written, novels, short stories, novellas, and all those different things. Do you want to speak a little bit about your approach to writing like various length stories and things like that?
Yeah, I really cut my teeth writing short stories, and I would highly recommend that to anyone who is interested in just working on the craft itself. Because what's amazing about short stories, it's super low commitment. If you want to try a new technique, try out a new skill, you can do it in a couple thousand words. You don't have to commit a year of your life to trying it out and potentially it not working. So. I've written a lot of short stories, and because of that, I think my natural inclination is to put a lot of information into a small word count. And I do that a lot using like inference and implication a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
time, or like building mood through scene setting. Like everything's doing double, triple duty in a short story because it has to. There's so little, words to work with. Um, so it's comes much more naturally to me to write something condensed. It's actually more challenging for me to kind of draw out scenes and stuff because um my go-to is like, well, I could write this in a page. And then I remember like it would just slow down. It would actually be stronger though if it was 4 pages. So like, let's, take our time a little bit.
I get that though, because especially whenever we meet Johnny, you say so much without having to say it. Like the fact that she was at the cafe and it didn't seem like much of a chance, but then she, like the fact that she plays it off that way and there was obviously an intention behind her being there at that time, that says so much about her before we ever get, well, this is what she is, what she does, what she looks like, her personality. That scene setting alone says so much about her. So that, that reads true for short fiction. It always really like I find myself really more impressed with short stories than I am with novels sometimes because of how punchy they can be. Like you're not wasting time, you're being very efficient, and you're still delivering the same blows that, 300-400 page novels can sometimes.
Totally. I think also it appeals to different kinds of readers. So like for me, I'm really in it for the prose and like for the emotions that we evoke in a story. So I love like an ambiguous moment. I love like super gray characters. I always want my characters to be gray. I'm not really there for the plot. And a lot of readers, what they're really looking for is plot. So totally understand why you want to go to novels and even series and stuff like that, because you're showing up to be told a story. Makes perfect sense. But then I think there are readers that are more like me that are kind of like, I just want to languish on a paragraph, you know?
Well, I hate to say it because it sounds so casual, but it's all about the vibes. It's about the
Yeah.
vibes of unease. And in a way, I think one of the things that works so well for me with horror in general is, I was a thriller fan before I was a horror fan, and I got really tired of the boring logic of like straightforward mystery. But what I love with horror is you can give me horrible vibes. You can give me the worst, like this is awful. But part of the mystery is in getting to the end is why is it that way?
Yeah.
And what are we gonna do about it too? And I think that just like sparks interest in my brain all the way through, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a logical answer either. It can be so freaking creative.
Yeah, I actually like when things don't make sense. Like, I love stuff that like a lot of people don't. I love like Julia Armfield's her short stories in Salt Slow.
Yeah.
Um, like just I like weird and like unexplained and like I like stories that make me think about it after and go, I think this is what happened, but is that what happened? And like I don't know, that's a real draw for me and totally understand why some people read that and are like, I gave you all of my time and you did not even tell me what happened. Like I also understand that perspective, but I like you am showing up for the vibes.
Yeah. And there are times that I do crave like the logic and like I will want to read something straightforward, but for whatever reason this year, this is such a side tangent, but like I have been wanting to read nothing but female authors about and for about mostly like female stories. and I don't really care about plot. Like I'm about like we need to express some anger and some rage and we need to like, work this out on the page. And for whatever reason, I mean, it's really no question as to why. The world outside is burning. But I keep reaching for a story. In particular this year, I just keep reaching for these things again and again. And I don't know what exactly shifted in my brain, but I've moved away from the logic and reasoning to I'm like, I don't even give a shit if it makes sense in the end. If it makes me feel and validates my feelings, like great, that's where I'm at, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Have you read Lady Macbeth from Ava Reed?
No, I've been seeing that one floating around. I really want to read it though. It's got a beautiful cover. It's that kind of like very dainty, like gorgeous with a hot pink gothic
Yes.
text on it. Yeah, okay. I need to
It's
read that one.
it will give you the moments because I also am looking for like a moment of rage. I also want like moments of eroticism
Yeah.
often when I read a story, especially in like dark fiction. I love like a tragedy. Like give me a
Yeah.
tragedy all the time. Like characters being brought down by their own flaws. I love when it's like erotic and gothic and like melancholy and just like simmering with everything dark. Because, like, to me, that's the real darkness is like the sort of hedonistic, nihilistic, sad girls that are getting it on.
No, I get it. I just read Christy Demeter's Such a Pretty Smile for the first time. I don't know if you've read that one.
Oh man, I've heard good things.
Oh my God, that one like whew. And I had an advanced copy of her other one, Dark Sisters, that's coming out later this year, which is equally good, but there's something about Such a Pretty Smile that just like made my stomach hurt in a way that hasn't hurt in a very long time. It was very, very good. And it was about that kind of like self-destructive nature of like feminism and,
Yeah.
truth and reality. It was so, so good. Ugh, but
Oh, I'll add it to my TBR for
dude,
sure.
the TBR is never ending over here. I mean, we could probably go recommendation for recommendation and it would never ever end.
Probably.
Um, okay, but back to your book, I Can Fix Her. So, like I said, I don't know, not to give it away, your story lands in a very interesting and I think it's very beautiful point of kind of self-reflection, examination of humanity as a whole, like of people, how we connect with one another and what we're gonna do to one another. Um, how is the writing process and writing that ending in particular? Because it felt very emotional to me whenever I read it. So I'm always curious whenever these scenes that are packed with this much emotion, how it feels on the other side of them.
It was very emotional to write the ending. And I say that earnestly. I don't get emotional over like killing a character when I'm writing or anything like that. But this in particular, if you'll notice, the dedication is this is the last one, you son of a bitch. And
Yes.
that's to a person in particular who that toxic relationship really inspired me to write all of these stories about this kind of toxic relationship, kind of to process through that and play with it on the page. But writing the ending of I Can Fix Her really felt like having a conversation with my younger self, um, and having to be super honest about what my younger self would have said to me. Um, and it was devastating. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was really difficult.
I don't know what it is. There have been a few things that I've read recently that have like openly embraced that younger self conversation, and it wrecks me every single time. I don't know if it has to deal with the innocence of a younger self, of oh, I know what you're in for and you don't. That is so tragic. Like we just talked about tragedy, there's something very tragic in that. I don't know if it's the goodwill of like wanting to advise a younger self to maybe not hurt as much as you are, but man, I don't know what it is, but it hits me every single time.
It's rough. And I think like the roughest thing for me is sort of feeling like, do you remember when that social media trend was going around and everyone was like, I took my younger self out to coffee and I
Yeah.
said, and it was sort of positive and warm and fuzzy. And like my younger self was like drowning in this terrible addiction and like you couldn't tell her anything and like her thinking was so sick,
Hmm.
um that like I just know like a conversation with my younger self would not have gone that way. Like
Yeah.
it would have been really brutal.
Yeah. Well, and that's like the thing of it too is, like that, like you said, the trend is very supposed to be positive, but I also feel like there's not a full reality to that. Like sometimes I think it's a little idealized, like, oh, I would love to, but we all know like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And anybody who knows anybody about wanting to instill changes or like, self-betterment, you can only do it if the person or yourself is there to do it themselves. Like no amount of anybody telling you to do it is going to make it any better.
Yeah.
Um, and so that trend was really interesting to me to see because I was like, it's cute, I like it, but I was like, this is not this ain't real. This is
Yeah.
not how I would go.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel that.
Yeah. Well, I think that I Can Fix Her is a really complex story that you fit a lot into a very short space. And it hit me in a very profound way because it's just, to me, like I said, the dynamics that you explore with relationships and what you're willing to do to yourself to try and like search for or accomplish that thing that you think is so right is so profound. Um, but as a whole, I Can Fix Her comes out on June 3rd. What does the rest of the year look like for you? What are you working on? Is there more of this kind of writing coming from you in the future? Like what can we expect from you?
Yeah, so I'm really excited for this year. I am traveling quite a bit to lots of writery stuff. So I'll be at StokerCon in June. In August, I will be at WorldCon, which it'll be my first time ever going there. Super excited. It's in Seattle. I'm going to be at ArmadilloCon in Texas in September. And in November, I'll be at Horror Reader Weekend in
Yeah.
Hudson, New York. So I'll be around. So if anyone is planning to go to any of those, more than happy to sign whatever if you find me there. So lots of events this year. And I also have 3 projects on submission with my agent, which is a lot of projects.
Yeah.
So, we're hoping to rehome my short story collection. I
Yeah.
do not apologize for my position on men. I have a Golden Girls meets Bonnie and Clyde sapphic sort of thriller, but it's more kind of book club fiction book that's out on sub. And I also have a historic horror. I would say it's like sort of horror romance. In the Edwardian period out on submission called Nesting Birds. So hoping to have some news about some or all of those soon. That's all exciting. And I'm also writing a thriller right now that's sort of game based. That's been really fun.
Interesting. You had
Yeah.
posted about the Golden Girls story a while ago, and I cannot tell you how badly I want to read that. That sounds incredible.
Oh, great.
I'm hoping that that gets picked up sometime soon because I am dying to read that.
Thank you. Me too. So it's called Happily Ever After the Murders, and it's inspired by my late grandmother, Minnie.
Yeah.
Um, so like I'll try to be brief about this, but I get very excited talking about
Oh,
Minnie.
feel
So
free to talk about it. Come on. We got the time.
so Minnie, my dad always described her to me growing up, because she passed away, I was still pretty young, as a chain smoking rageaholic. And as I've gotten
Incredible.
older, I've like learned more about Minnie, that she would drive around with a shovel in her trunk of her car because when she saw landscaping that she liked, she would pull over and dig it up and bring it home to plant in her own garden. This is a quote from my dad, take in strays. Most notably, my dad's quote, cousin Herbie, which was this like super flamboyant gay man that would be in their above ground pool. They're from Long Island, New York. Or sorry, not Long Island. They're from Queens, New York. And have like parties with like all of his gay friends. My dad would be like 10 years old and they're all out there in like banana hammocks in the yard. So Minnie was incredible. But when I came to be an adult, I knew that Minnie's husband died young and unexpectedly. When my dad was 2 years old, he dropped dead and he was only like in his early 40s. And then I found out that there is a woman named Ev who moved in right after he died, and her husband also died at the same time. that Minnie's husband died. And Minnie and Ev lived together and raised their children together for the rest of their lives. For the rest of their lives. And they are now buried beside each other. They were together for like 40 years. And instead of being buried by their late husbands, they are buried next to each other in New
Shut
York.
the hell up.
So I was like, I'm sorry, what? When I like heard all of these pieces, and I would be like, Dad, did Minnie like kill her husband? And he was like, I don't know, I don't think, but I feel like these women killed their husbands. Keep in mind, Ev has been described to me as, quote, having all of the charm of a truck driver. They like ran a 24-hour diner together. They were like they cursed all the time. They called their husbands the old dirty bastards as they're like chain smoking, drinking coffees at the 24-hour diner. So just these super rough women.
Oh my god, this is everything. People can't see it, but I am living for it. Oh my god.
Like I was living when I heard this, and I was like, I must write them a book. There is simply
Yeah.
no other choice. So Happily Ever After the Murders is like my homage to Minnie and Ev, who I choose to believe were Black widows and lesbian lovers.
Hell yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my god, what a life, man.
What a life, right?
So much for like the lore is so extensive. I mean,
Oh,
just
it's so
it's so
great.
rich. That's incredible. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, I want to even read this even more now. I didn't think it was possible, but now I need to read this. That's incredible. Oh my gosh. Well, I really hope that all of the projects get, picked up and out in the world soon, but in particular that one. And then of course, the rest of 2025 promoting I Can Fix Her. And I will be at StokerCon, so hopefully I get to see you at some point.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
I've told a few people, I'm like, people are gonna think I'm weird as shit. Like, I'm not even a hugger, but I just feel so like close to all of you. I just want to like run up and give everybody a hug when I see them.
Oh no, totally. I've told other people, I feel like StokerCon, it feels like returning to summer camp or something.
Yeah,
Where,
yeah.
you could be like, is that? And I'll like call someone by their like online handle. I'll be like, are you? And they'll be like, are you? And then we'll be like, we've been commenting for years now. Like, it's so fun.
It is. No, I'm so excited. It'll be my first time going, so I'm really really stoked. But I'm equally stoked for you. I'm really excited for people to get their hands on I Can Fix Her. I think it's a really unique story, and like I said, it just packs so much into such a confined space, and I love what it's saying about the human condition, our ideas with relationships and the places that we're willing to go to find what we think is right for us. So I think it's a brilliant story, and I can't wait for people to get it on June 3rd. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we did not address today?
I think we really hit it. I guess the last thing I would add is there is going to be a bonus story in the final edition of I Can Fix Her, which is really exciting. It's a short story that was included in my collection called Write My Eulogy on the Glory Hole Bathroom Stall. And it's extremely brutal, but similar, I think, in theme. So I'm excited for people to kind of get I Can Fix Her plus that bonus in the
It's a
final
hell
one.
of a title. I love that title.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ray. This has been an absolute delight. And like I said, I cannot wait for people to get their hands on this book. It's out on June 3rd from Clash. And yeah, until next time,
Thanks for having me.
anytime. You are welcome anytime that you would like. Once more, just the biggest, most heartfelt thanks to Ray for not only coming on and answering all of my questions about I Can Fix Her, but also just being as honest and vulnerable as she was with this conversation. I can only imagine what it's like to sit down and write something like this, but to engage in a thought provoking conversation like this is a whole entire other deal, it seems to be entirely. And so I'm just extremely appreciative as always to Ray and to all of the authors that I speak to who come on here and who are so honest and just willing to really dig down deep into what they've created and speak about the places that these things come from, whether it's personal or not. It just means a whole lot that I get to share this space with these people and kind of, exist in a moment in time where, we're being really real, we're being really vulnerable, and we're being really authentic. That's a really cool thing to be able to do. But moving on from all of this happy stuff, I am back hopefully with weekly releases for you guys. Next week, I will be back with N.L. Lavin and Hunter Burke. They're the co authors of their debut novel of Flesh and Blood. And my favorite thing about them is that they're local to me. They are Cajun. They are Cajun through and through. Our conversation, I literally could not stop laughing and smiling. My cheeks hurt so much from smiling. Just hearing some of the Cajun slang that we use. From somebody else who is an author and existing in this space is just a really, really cool thing. So be on the lookout for that. I do have to share that I probably will be taking one more week off, and that will be the week after StokerCon. I will be there in Connecticut. If you plan on being there, please come tell me hi. I don't know if I have RBF or not. I just exist in space, but please, I'm friendly. I promise. I'll try and like have candy or something. So like, if you want to come say hi, I might have Jolly Ranchers on me or something. I don't know. Um, but I'm super, super excited to get to go do this. I'm so excited to see all the people that I've only had the chance to talk to online and kind of meet the people that I've forged these really deep connections with. So I'm over the moon, although it does mean that it probably will mean one more week off of the podcast. Hopefully that is forgivable to you all, but if not, I understand. At any rate, I just want to thank you guys again for sticking with me and coming back to this podcast. I did take a month off because, life can get to be a lot. There's just a lot going on right now, but I am very, very happy to be back. I am happy to be talking to new authors. I am happy to be reading new stories. I'm happy to be discovering new kinds of stories that I enjoy. So yeah, just stay tuned, stick around. Who knows what I'll be into by the time that we're back with new episodes. So thank you guys all again. You all are the best. We could not, I could not be doing this without everybody's support. And yeah, I hope that you all are having a lovely start to the summer. Until next time, this is Anna, and I'll see y'all later.